Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are on the second book of the Harper Hall trilogy. So I talked about this one in passing a lot in the last video because in a lot of ways this is my favorite and also the one that I find myself wistfully wishing for more of. More than the other two. So this is Dragonsinger. Again, I had to get a purse edition because, giant, the really big hardcovers don't fit properly into my bag. Anyways, so Menolly has impressed her 9 fire lizards. She has the other version of impressed the Master Harper of Pern. She gets brought to the Harper Hall at the start of this book, and off the bat, this is a book of Menolly spinning around, not quite knowing what's happening, and it's not malice. I mean, some of it is malice because there are some malicious people in this book, but in a lot of ways, fundamentally, it's that nobody thought to explain things to her, that this is kind of, that she's brought to the Harper Hall, and the thing about the Harper Hall is that most kids are brought to the Harper Hall very, very young. They're apprenticed young, and they get raised in the hall, and so they learn all of these things by osmosis, by being around it, whereas Menolly is brought in, and she's already, 14, so she's older than most of the other new arrivals at the Harper Hall, but also she has spent literally years having it dinned into her head that girls can't be harpers, that her music is nothing but twiddles, that she shouldn't be songwriting because that is a man's game, and B, doing that is worthless. And so she gets to this place where the Master Harper wants her to do this, and it's a complete 180 from everything she's experienced. And the thing is, she gets there and they decide to put her into a small cottage off from the main area of the Harper Hall, because the thing is that, she's a girl, so we can't stick her in the dorms with all the boys. So they stick her in with the female students who are basically young holders' daughters who have been sent to the Harper Hall to basically get some additional education. Kind of like in the Middle Ages when a young woman would learn how to play the lute or the dulcimer or whatever because it's an attractive thing for a young woman who is husband hunting to have some skill with a musical instrument. And so those girls have been sent to the Harper Hall not as apprentices, but as young women filling out their education. And they drop Menolly in there, and Menolly is from a Seahold where she wouldn't have been expected to make a particularly advantageous marriage. She is a youngest daughter. She is also, of course, the one who has always been slacking off, doing that music junk. And so they put her in with these young women who are social climbing, who are, the very much the stereotype of the rich mean girls. And Menolly doesn't, arrives late and doesn't quite know what to do with these rich girls who are sneering down their nose at her and all of these things. And what happens is that she goes throughout the day and, the Harpers have sent her to a bunch of masters for testing. It's placement testing, to find out how good her musical theory is, to find out how good her understanding of the various aspects of harpers is, because, for example, Master Gerant is the man who makes instruments, which is something that is done at the Harper Hall, and, it's it's considered a fundamental in a lot of areas of study that even if you're not going to be the person who builds the things, you still need to have some kind of a basic idea of how those things are built and how they function. And so, she gets tested by him about how does she, how well does she understand how to make various kinds of instruments. She needs to get herself a guitar, so part of the test is, can she pick a good one? And, including things like the fact that she picks up a guitar and tests it and immediately puts it back, and they ask her what's wrong with it, and she says, it's fantastic, but this is clearly too good for an apprentice. And Gerent, gets sort of elbowed and told, see, she had no way of knowing that was a special commission for the Master Harper. So she goes and picks the correct instrument, a good practice instrument for somebody who's an apprentice and so on. But the girls where she's staying are malicious. They wind up basically keeping messages from one of the other masters that he's a composition specialist, and so he's there to test her musicianship on instruments, as opposed to Master Shenangar, because Master Domik is the composer. Master Shenangar is a singing teacher that he specializes in voice. She gets tested and so on, but the girls at that cottage, a letter is left for Menolly saying, please report to Master Domik tomorrow morning, and they don't tell her, so she winds up lost and confused and in trouble and being directed by one of the other Harpers to join up with the other girls at their classes. And Menolly, who doesn't know what's going on because she hasn't been given some sort of an itinerary, she hasn't been given a syllabus, she hasn't even been given a proper tour of the whole place to understand where everything is and where people are that she should ask, spends a large portion of the early stages of this book in particular just not sure where she should be going, because the other apprentice Harpers, they've been there for years and they know what everything is and where everything is. She makes friends with a young boy named P. Muir, or something like that. I don't know. I don't have it in me to bother to check if there is a pronunciation guide. It was always P. Muir in my head, but, you can pronounce it however you like. And she makes friends with him, and he does his best, but he winds up, he's an incredibly snarky, cocky boy, and so what works for an incredibly cocky 10-year-old does not work necessarily for a 14-year-old girl suffering from incredibly low self-esteem. So she goes through this. In the course of events, we also get, one of the other things about this book is these three books are very much Lower Decks episodes in a way. I talked about this with Naroka's story, about how that's a Lower Decks episode of what's going on in the background with the main story of Moretta's Ride. Dragon Song, Dragonsinger, and in Dragon Drums as well, in their way, are books that are taking place during the background of Dragon Quest. Menolly is sort of seeing Fëanor and Breck's story sort of from a vast distance in the background. And if you look at this illustration on the cover, you can see the man and the dragon falling in the background. That's because partway through this book, it turns out that when Fëanor went to the Red Star, sort of in a, we're just going to prove one way or another what we can do, whether dragons can do this or not, Fëanor winds up in dire straits, falling out of the sky. He and his dragon, Canth, both burned dreadfully from the atmosphere on the Red Star and falling through the air, and basically every single dragon and fire lizard, nearly all of them on Pern, freak out and fly to Bend and Weir to catch Canth as he falls out of the sky. And they sort of form a big platform of dragon bodies to get him down to the ground safely. But what it means is that everybody who has a dragon or a fire lizard gets the psychic backwash of Breck freaking out when she realizes that Fëanor and Canth are possibly dying. And so Menolly has a massive, horrifying panic attack when that happens, and there's a lot of, and so it's a very, very dramatic moment. We also, in this book, get the impression of the Master Harpers, Fire Lizard Zaire, and Sibel, who is a journeyman, and one of the people who's helping shepherd Menolly through this first period in the Harper Hall. And he also gets a fire lizard, and that's a lovely scene. Dramatic and flailing, because fire lizards hatch out of the egg, and they're desperate and hungry and will eat everything, and, so there tends to be a lot of flailing when there's a hatching. But the thing about this is a thing where Menolly winds up writing a song based on this, and this is one of those things that the Master Harper wanted her for, and this, she throws together a song and it gets written down in the background, and, she turns around and finds that somebody has been writing this down for her while she was just improvising and not really paying attention to anything. And it's one of those moments that it strikes her particularly hard because, as she says later in the book, she used to get beaten for songwriting. And that's the thing about this, is that this is the book where, in the first one, Menolly is sort of, a lot of it is that she's constantly moving forward and constantly going places and doing things and coping with stuff. And this is the book where she has this opportunity to sit still, to be in one place, that she's not having to also take care of 9 fire lizards and find food for them and food for herself and so on and so on and so forth. She's now in a place where somebody else is making the food, so she doesn't have to worry about it, where she has all of the physical objects that she needs to survive, so she doesn't have to worry about doing that. She has shelter. And so a lot of this book is about everything catching up to her, about her just figuring out where she is now. And that's part of what makes this book feel too short, because she gets to the Harper Hall and she's basically been there a week, 2 weeks, virtually no time, when the Master Harper says, listen, she got a solid education at Half Circle Seahold. She knows all of the technicals that she needs to know, so let's promote her straight to journeyman. She has gotten to that point in her education where he can do this, but it happens so fast that this is the one book in this trilogy that I just want so much more of, because I want more of the world building of the Harper Hall. I want more of Menolly just learning to deal with things and where she is now, and the aftermath of her promotion to journeyman. There's a lot there that I wish was in the book that isn't, but it's still great. So I think I'm going to wrap it up before I go over my time. So that is everything, and I'll be back next week with Dragon Drums, which isn't even about Menolly for the most part. So see you all next week.